There is this fire in each and every one of us burning. And we have different words for it. It's love, it's energy, it's the warmth. The Quakers call it the inner light, the Spirit of God. You remember Pentecost, the flame that comes to each one of us. And our role, how I believe it to be, is to keep that fire going and to fuel it and nurture it and feed that inner fire, because that fire makes us come alive. That fire is at work in us, warms us and warms those around us. I always love Christmas Eve when we light the candles, and I tell you what I like the most is when the people's faces are glowing and reflecting that light back. There is something in that glowing and that reflecting. And I think that's the light, the fire in each one of us, and to pay attention to that and fuel and feed that inner fire, have it come alive and breathe new life into those embers that they burn. That's what I always am longing for, and what I experience in scriptures when I go into them and a little bit deeper into them. And this is one of those scripture readings. What happens there? Well, what happens is the description of this very encounter in between Angel Gabriel and Mary. And it tells me God finds a way. God finds a way to reach Mary. God finds a way to reach you and you and you and me. For some, this experience is, wow, like Zechariah last Sunday, we heard about him. He was serving in the temple, and it knocked his socks off. He was just dumbstruck. He was so overwhelmed he couldn't speak anymore. It was overwhelming for him, for Zechariah. It's different with Mary. There comes an angel, and it says Mary is perplexed. She's puzzled. She's kind of, I'm not quite sure. Did you get the right address? You got the wrong number? I'm not sure you really mean me. So there is this question about Mary. Not so sure about it. But God finds a way to her. And I deeply believe that God finds a way to each and every one of us, and it comes in different shapes, forms, and sizes. And this is what it takes, in my experience. It's to pay attention. I think sometimes like the fishers got it. You throw in, you see the bobber, and then you're taking patience. And it takes a while sometimes until the nibble or the tug. And what you see as a tug when you're out fishing, the same, I think, happens for us. There is a tug on our hearts. There is something that wants to come to us, something that wants to be received, some treasure, some gift, some calling. And Frederick Buchner said, this calling, this tug, where you are called, you specifically, is where some of your joy, some of your gifts, some of your treasures meet some kind of need around you. So where your joy and gladness meets the need of someone around you, that's the place of your calling, of the tug, where what can I do? How can I serve? How can I make a difference? And for Mary, it was very specifically to carry Jesus in her heart, in her body. And I think the same thing is for us true. When we carry Jesus in our hearts, when we open up to that and discover that we are carried by him and he's walking with us, that is amazing. The second thing is, God chooses unlikely people. Mary, a teenager, very lowly, a peasant girl. Think of that. Sometimes we think of ourselves, not very high, not very proud, not very up there with the high and mighty. We don't have to be. God chooses, just like Mary, God chooses you and you and you and each one of us. We all have our own calling. And actually, God has a preference for the people who are not too full of themselves, but for people who are humble, who are receptive, who are open, who are hurting, who are longing for the living God in their lives. So God chooses Mary, God chooses you. And how does God do it? Well, for Mary, it's the angel, and for us, they're the nudges, they're the invitations, the tugs, did you pay attention? Did you hear that? Did you feel the tug on your heart, that invitation, that pull, that draw in? And the message that Gabriel gives to Mary is, do not be afraid. This may be a challenging situation for you, Mary, basically, Gabriel says. But don't be afraid, don't be scared. A few weeks back, David Brooks gave a lecture at Susquehanna University, and one of the few lines that stayed with me was, what would you do if you were not afraid? If you were not concerned about what do people think, or what will that be, or if so and so, what would you do if you wouldn't worry as much, or if you weren't afraid? If those things that hold you back would not be there, what would you do? And isn't that what sometimes gets in the way? And sometimes I sit on the sofa, and sometimes with Sigrid and we're together there, and then we think of, well, what is it that we're concerned about? What do we worry? And I think each and every one of us has some concerns, some things that hold us back. So think about what holds you back? What gets in the way for you to live your divine calling? What gets in the way? And to become aware of that, and maybe even write it down and let it go, is so helpful. What does Mary do? In the end, all this is lined out and planned out for her. What she does is she says, yes. Yes, she's basically saying yes to God. Your plan for me, oh God, I'm in it. And I think that's the appropriate response for all of us when you have that tug, when you feel a calling, when you're invited to be your best self and carry Jesus in your heart and give birth to Jesus where you live and to those around you, to reflect the light. Our best way to do that is to say, yes, God, I'm in it. And the world is desperate for that. The world is desperate for peace, for hope, for people who are on fire, for people who are turning to the light and reflecting the light, and for people to carry Jesus in their heart, to carry Jesus in their bodies, and to give birth to Jesus where you live. The world is desperate for that. Will you say yes to that, like Mary?